And that should start us now. All right, so then we're ready to broadcast. Are you ready to roll? Excellent.
I'm ready to roll.
All right, and here we go. We'll give that a few moments to connect in for everyone, and we are hoping that everyone will be able to see us at this moment. And we are now broadcasting live, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Renee Pettis-Jones, and I am the Community Engagement Development Director with the National Federation for Just Communities. And this today is another installment of our series entitled Historical Contributions and Diverse Conversations. And I'd like to introduce and welcome today, we have our guest speaker, Dr. Dexter Johnson. And he is the NASA Technical Fellow, Loads and Dynamics at the NASA Glenn Research Center at Lewis Field. Welcome, Dr. Johnson. Did I say that correctly?
You said it correctly. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's good to see you again, Renee.
It is always a pleasure, and thank you for joining us as part of this series. We really would like to have some very interesting conversations with folks from across the country that can enlighten us and also educate us. And I am looking forward to having this conversation with you today. Hopefully our technical side will work with us. It's just me and this computer in Zoom, and you never know, but we're going to work with it together today.
Okay, great.
Dexter, do you mind? Oh, now how should I address you? Should it be Dr. Dex or should it be Dr. Johnson? Which would you prefer?
I don't specify any particular way, whatever you feel comfortable calling me.
Okay, we'll go back and forth on this, I'm sure. Can you tell us just a little bit about your roots here in Buffalo and the schools you attended, and just a little background before we introduce a video that I'd like to share with our viewers?
Sure. I'm a native Buffalonian, born and raised. If those who might remember Millett Fillmore Hospital, that's where I was born at. I understand it's no longer a hospital anymore. I think they converted it to some apartments or something like that. So was born and raised right there in Buffalo. I grew up on the east side of Buffalo. So I lived for many years on Wohlers Avenue. So it's Best and Wohlers, so sort of Martin Luther King Park, Humboldt Park, you know, that's what we remember it as back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And and so I spent most of my early childhood there. I went to what was School 39. I think it's called Martin Luther King School now. It's on High Street, so the elementary school. I went there pretty much from K through 4th grade. And so in the 4th grade, they had a special program where they started to do the magnet schools and things like that. And so they transferred me to what is School 54. So that's on Main Street. Yes. And I went to 5th grade and 6th grade there. Then that's kind of when they started to shift things around, and I ended up going to what was just then created City Honors. City Honors was a middle school, or at least it went from 7 to 12. So I was in the very first 7th grade class of City Honors, and you know, went through all through high school there. But in terms of other areas I live in, so from birth until sophomore in high school, that's where I went. I lived in the Best Street, Wohlers area. But then in high school, I moved over to the Bailey, Delavan area. So I lived on Texas Street for the rest of my time living in Buffalo.
Wow.
So those are some of my, you know, connections with Buffalo. I mean, I still have my immediate family there. 2 brothers and a sister, and my mom, they all live there. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law and some other extended family there. On my wife's side, she's from Buffalo too. So wonderful. I have a deep connection with Buffalo.
Oh, and we are so proud of you, and we are so glad that you do still have that connection with us here in Buffalo. That's very important. You know, what I was thinking would be nice is if we could possibly watch a video that you shared with me that is also on your YouTube page. And I'm going to try to see if we can get us over to this, because I'd like to share that with all of our viewers. It really kind of speaks a little bit about the history that you will be speaking more about in more depth. But let's see if we can get this from the technical side. It's always interesting, but we're gonna make this work today. So we're gonna try this. All right, everybody. You should be seeing my screen, and here we go.
This NAFP Spotlight is brought to you in part by the United Negro College Fund, Special Programs Corporation, and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. In an effort to enhance the professional development of NASA employees and STEM faculty at minority institutions, NASA developed the NASA Administrators Fellowship Program. Through this premier program, NAFP works to increase the ability of these minority institutions to respond to NASA's overall research, development, and educational mission. To highlight and honor the achievements of its fellows, the NASA Administrators Fellowship Program spotlights Dr. Dexter Johnson.
When I was a boy, I remember loving to watch the Apollo space program, watching the astronauts attempt to go to the moon.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
I also was very involved in astronomy as a young person. And so I think I was very acquisitive about why things were the way they were. And I think that sparked a major interest.
In 1997, Dr. Johnson, now an aerospace research engineer at NASA Glenn, learned about the NAFP program.
I was interested in applying to the NASA Administrators Fellowship Program because, one, it offered an opportunity to get exposure to a higher level of NASA and how NASA operates and so forth. Also, it had the component of being able to go and teach at a historically black college, university, or minority serving institution, and so forth. And teaching has been, or at that time was in my mind as a possible augmentation to my career or post-NASA career endeavor.
Johnson then selected Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University as his host institution. He hoped to impart his knowledge and experience in the field of advanced control systems on the students and faculty of FAMU.
My time at Florida A&M was a very great time, very good time, and having been able to teach a semester there provided me an opportunity to interact with a lot of the graduate students, a lot of the undergraduate students there in the area of mechanical engineering, particularly in control systems. I taught an advanced controls course, and many of the students there were in some way involved in controls projects or controls curriculums, or even students of the professor who I was working with. And one thing that I felt is it enabled me to impart some of the experience that I had in working in research here at NASA Glenn and take that to the classroom. Many of the examples that I used in teaching the class, I used from technology that either I was working on or I was familiar with because of my experience here at NASA.
All right. Well, I want to make sure that we acknowledge and thank you for sharing that video. I'm going to try to put the link in our chat feature shortly for everyone. But in general, you know, it kind of gives a little bit of a history of where you are and where you came from. But, you know, more importantly, tell us a little bit about your career there at NASA and how long have you been with NASA?
Yeah, no, yeah, I thought that, you know, would probably give a little bit of snapshot in terms of video and so forth about my background, but I can certainly fill in some of the details. And I've been blessed to be able to have been associated with NASA for about 33 years. So
Wow.
Of course, I'm telling my age.
We won't go there, right?
But basically, it all started, the formal kind of relationship started in grad school. So, and I'm sure we're gonna maybe talk a little bit about that later, but I went to University of Buffalo, and I went there for all of the various degrees, so bachelor's,
Wow.
master's, and PhD.
Wow.
But it was when I was finishing my bachelor's and was looking to actually go to work. I was actually looking for a job, but an opportunity came my way to go to grad school. So I got a NASA fellowship.
Wow.
Basically, NASA paid for my master's and PhD, and so that was the very first time that I kind of worked directly with NASA, and I got to go spend some time at the NASA Center. It actually was NASA Langley Research Center, which is in Hampton, Virginia.
Wow.
So I spent 3 years working with that particular center. And so 3 years later, though, the opportunity came up when I was just about to finish my PhD, that the NASA Glenn Research Center, which previously was named the Lewis Research Center, but today it's called Glenn Research Center, had an opening, and I was able to get hired in as a full-time employee.
Wow.
And still work and finish up my PhD. And so I've been here ever since.
Wow, that's amazing. That journey is just fantastic. And, you know, of course, I'm sure folks will be very interested, and if you don't mind explaining for us lay people that don't understand, what is a technical fellow and how many are there?
Yeah, so a technical fellow is a particular title. It's considered to be a very high level technical position. It is not just NASA. So let me just say, there's variations, especially in the aerospace or other technical positions. So I'm a member of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. I'm a member, and then we have companies like the Boeing company you may have heard of, Lockheed Martin. Those are aerospace companies. And so they have a group of individuals who are sort of their technical experts. And so they're the top of the top in their field, and they have the responsibility many times of providing consultation, either about in corporate, about their products and so forth, within government agencies, basically our programs and projects and our missions, to be able to be consulted in terms of our disciplines. So now for NASA, we have 19 technical fellows, and they pretty much are discipline experts. So I put it in the sense of a physician. So we all have our family care physician, primary care physician. They tend to look at the whole body. But then we know we have an ophthalmologist for our eyes. We have a cardiologist for our heart. So they specialize in different things. So these NASA 19 fellows, they specialize in certain aerospace disciplines. So my particular discipline is something called structural dynamics in general, but for NASA, they call it loads and dynamics. I won't go into all the why behind it, but it's a structural, mechanical type of position. We have other people, other 19 tech fellows there focused on human factors. So like astronauts and their health and well-being. And then you have fluids, and you have aerodynamics, you have structures, you have mechanisms. And so we basically are the stewards for all of NASA when it comes to those particular disciplines. And making sure, just like with the medical doctor, you look at the health of the person, the whole person. So the same way we look at the health of our aerospace capabilities and our aerospace disciplines. And so they look to us, and we're called to basically respond to particularly urgent type of matters, but we also look strategically way in advance, 10, 20, 30 years down the line, across the spectrum. So that's what a tech fellow is.
Gotcha. And if I understood this correctly, you are the only African-American technical fellow? Is that a fair assessment?
That is correct. Basically, out of the 19, I'm the only African-American tech fellow. And I don't recall, and I've been affiliated in other capacities with supporting this this role, and I've never known of any other African American tech fellow. Now, there are other roles that complement the organization for which we kind of are situated. And so there have been African American center chief engineers. So chief engineers, they have a certain role that maybe is specific to a NASA center or a specific program or project. So we have had African American chief engineers, but never I'm aware of a tech fellow. Yeah.
Wow. That's a major achievement, and I applaud you for that. And certainly, you know, it brings me to my next question that I have for you, which would be, did you find many obstacles that impacted your career choices? And what were they? What did you run into? Were there any brick walls, any opportunities that opened up that maybe, you know, some of our listeners might want to explore?
Yeah, no, there are definitely some speed bumps that have been encountered. There's been some detours along the journey, and a lot of it, as many people will say, they make you better depending on how you address it. They make you better and cause you to grow. So I can I'll skip through a few things here, but hopefully it'll give a picture. So I actually got started in engineering because of a program that UB had. The Dean of Engineering at UB decided to have a program to introduce underrepresented students in the urban area, the field of engineering. So when I was a junior in high school at City Honors, I got a chance to come to UB for one summer and take two sort of freshman level classes, Introduction to Engineering and Introduction to Computers Engineering. So right there, they were trying to address some of the challenges where a lot of African Americans and a lot of urban folks aren't exposed to the engineering discipline. And so I benefited from that because when I was in that program, that's when the light came on, and I was like, this is what I want to do, in particularly aerospace engineering. Certainly just taking the curriculum at University of Buffalo, which is a predominantly white institution, there was very few African Americans that were pursuing engineering there. So I actually became a part of a professional organization called the National Society of Black Engineers. And so part of their mission involves helping those who are of African American background to succeed in engineering. And I was part of actually the team that started the very first chapter at the University of Buffalo. But what that helped us do is to overcome some of the barriers, because we would be in a class of 500 and we would look around and we might have 10, people of color. So where other cultures maybe were banding together, or whatever the commonality is, people, like persuasion tend to track and relate to one another. They would study together, they would share resources, they would tap into different things that help them be successful. Well, that helped me overcome the barrier because we helped each other become successful. And so I'm still involved with that organization because of what, it has done. One particular challenge I want to share, though, is now fast forwarding, I've gone through college. I'm now at that point where I was looking to either work or the opportunity to go to grad school was presented to me. Well, one of my mentors that I ended up working at NASA turned out to be a kind of Southern boy, and he had some tendencies that I don't want to stereotype, but they tend to be a little kind of biased. And so I actually had some obstacles there. There were times when he indicated to my academic advisor at UB that when I presented, it was like the worst thing ever. He couldn't believe that, I was, if I'm going to represent NASA and so forth in the work, then I got to do better than that. And my advisor, academic, had seen my presentation, and others I had practiced it before, and I had other students that, similarly were presenting, and they said it was not of the bad quality that he had said. And so that really almost caused me to not continue on in my efforts. And I have to say, I've shared this with a few people, but really, I thought that if I was to work at NASA, I would have been working at that NASA center, NASA Langley.
Wow.
However,
Wow.
when the opportunity came to come to Cleveland, I kind of felt better doing that route because I knew that if I would have went the other route, I probably would have worked with this person.
Yes.
But long story short, on this journey 30 years later, I've been blessed. And actually, to close it out a little bit, so becoming a tech fellow, which I've been in this position for 2 years, I'm actually a Langley employee.
Oh,
But
wow.
I just operate out of NASA Glenn. So it's funny how after 33 years, I thought I was going to work for Langley, and now 20, 30 years later, I am actually a Langley employee.
That's amazing. And, I'd love to skip to our next question, but I wanted to backtrack just a bit because in full disclosure, of course, you and I went to City Honors together, graduated together. And certainly what I'd like you to kind of explain and share with us is your experiences working at being at City Honors and attending City Honors, and how that may have helped you or not overcome any of those barriers that you were faced, because you just highlighted one of the very strongest barriers, which is that lack of communication, that lack of warmth, that lack of connecting with your fellow employees at NASA and having to work with people that really didn't want to work with you. And just kind of taking it back full circle to City Honors, from what I can recall in terms of my experiences, we just didn't feel that. We didn't get those barriers given to us. We were told that literally we could reach for the moon. And how did you feel about that experience, and how did that shape you moving forward?
No, that's a very good point, Renee. And so I'm glad you brought that up. And so City Honors played a big role. So I'll go back to when I talked about I was taking out a 4th grade. And so I went to School 54. So actually, up until then, I only knew African-American classmates. Now I had other teachers, Caucasian teachers and aides and so forth, but my neighborhood was African-American primarily, and my classmates were African-American. So when I went to 5th grade, I was exposed to classmates, Asian background, Hispanic background, Caucasian background, and then also different cultural shades amongst all of those different groups. And those couple of years, I really began to learn more about other cultures that I had been exposed to at that time. So 5th and 6th grade was sort of a runway to City Honors. So now when City Honors started in 7th grade, from 7th through 12th grade, as you said, the idea was to bring us all together to be able to help us to take off the barriers and share. And at least at that time, with the model that they have, it was intended for us to be able to reach our potential to the greatest potential. And so for me, it was at City Honors that I began to get stretched. So for instance, I wouldn't call myself a very good math person. I had a lot of love for science, and I would say I was just good, B, C kind of math student. But I had teachers who gave me an opportunity to stretch and to take steps. So I remember in 7th grade, I was given an opportunity to take 8th grade math. And I was like, okay, I'll try it. So that bumped me up a little bit. And then next thing I know, I'm taking trig and algebra, like, freshman and sophomore year. And so when I got to my junior year, they said, well, you could take senior math or calculus. So I actually ended up taking calculus for my junior and senior year. That was instrumental to me being able to, go into engineering. But the diversity of people at City Honors really helped me. I had a lot of good friendships across the different cultures. There's a lot of sub-stories and life lessons, even there. But it definitely catapulted me to being able to work with a lot of different people. Yeah.
I agree. I think that diversity there really opens your eyes and allows you to be able to understand and have a better understanding for all communities and for all people. And I think that is an important part of the educational process. And sometimes when you don't have those opportunities, you really don't get a chance to see and share different aspirations and ideas. And I do give a lot of credit to City Honors for trying to allow us to get beyond the skin color barrier or the cultural barriers and to be more inclusive, which I think is part of what we all need to become. And I think
Yes.
that's a highlight of our NFJC mission is the inclusion and respect for everyone involved. And, you know, one of the other questions that I would like to ask you is, what do you see in some of those disparities in those communities of color now? How do you see some of these disparities playing out in terms of choices, both educationally and professionally?
Yeah, there are many disparities still present. And I already shared a little bit about 40 years ago
Yes.
about the challenges that were, known back then, and some of the programs and efforts trying to address that. Well, I hate to say it, but some of those same challenges, if I can take STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, those type of career paths, we still see a gap in terms of the balance and the inclusion of folks like myself in those fields. I'm in the meetings, professional meetings or society meetings, where I am like the only one or one
Yes.
of a few.
Yes.
And then I work a lot with colleges, as you saw in that video clip. That was 20 years ago. I was
Yes.
working with historically Black colleges, universities, and so I was glad to have that experience and work with those students. But in general, you don't see that in the classrooms. You don't see
Yes.
that in the field, and so there still are barriers. And now that isn't because there haven't been a lack of effort or funds.
Yes.
And I've had many conversations. So there's a lot of programs directed to trying to increase STEM awareness among
Yes.
students and so forth. But you're just not seeing kind of the end results of that pipeline. And so there's something missing. There are certain things we're not connecting with it. And I want to let our youth know that you can do it,
Yes.
and the opportunity is there. But, unfortunately, the awareness maybe is not as common, or the pipelines are not fully populated as it could be. And so just know that you can do it. I mean, it's not impossible, but there are still some speed bumps and barriers that are still out there. Now, I'm a member of the National Society of Black Engineers, and so we actually have a professional chapter or segment of that organization where we still do quite a bit of activities to try to enhance our community when it comes to STEM. And there's other organizations I'm a part of too as well.
It's very important, representation matters. And I think that what you hit upon is exceedingly important for us to acknowledge that though we've come, a long ways, we still have so much more to do. And there are many more opportunities that we really do want to highlight. And having these types of dialogues and honest conversations, I think, are the key to saying, okay, we've got some issues. Let's see what we can do to overcome those roadblocks, and what opportunities can we highlight and acknowledge. And this is just one of them. And,
Yes.
It kind of leads me to the next question that I have for you is, where do you see our space technology and all of those efforts going? I mean, we've seen an explosion of technology now due to this pandemic and all of the technology involved in getting people up to speed working remotely like this, and these opportunities for having these Zoom webinars. What do you see space doing in the next 10, 20 years or so? How do you see our programs headed?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that question, because we are entering into a time period that we've never seen before when it comes to aerospace or space exploration or aerospace development, technology development. So one thing that I am real time, I mean, like today, like right now, am involved with, there's two things, and they're publicly known. From a space exploration perspective, NASA and the government, United States government, we've not had our own capability to send astronauts to space.
Wow.
since 2011.
Wow.
And so that's when we retired the space shuttle. And sometimes I get questioned, people say, well, the space shuttle retired, so NASA's closed. No, NASA did not close. NASA is very vibrant. There's a lot of stuff that we do across a number of different, what we call mission directorates. But the one that people see the most are the space shuttle or International Space Station visits. So
Yes.
two things that are happening right now in terms of capabilities and technology that will enable us to go to Mars. So we really are focusing on going to Mars. We haven't been to Mars in terms of people. But in order to do that, we have to learn to live and work in space for longer durations. Now, believe it or not, we have been working in space for on the order of up to 6 months at a time on the International Space Station. 20 years, we've had continual human presence floating around low Earth orbit in this generation. That's something that have never ever happened in our lifetime.
Wow.
But now, what we're about to do is we're about to take the next step to have our own American capability to send astronauts back into space.
Wow.
And many of you who may follow, we have a company called Space Exploration, or SpaceX for short. And also the Boeing company. Both of them are basically commercial providers building and developing capability to take astronauts up to the space station.
Wow.
And so May 27th, so mark your calendar, May 27th, we around 4:00 p.m., the current plans is for us to launch 2 astronauts on a new SpaceX human certified vehicle to go to the space station. That will be the first time since 2011 that we've actually had people launch from American soil to go into space. But that's just
amazing. So even with this pandemic that we're dealing with, we're still moving forward and still bringing people up to space at this point.
Yes, because some things have been determined, mission critical or mission essential. And so basically we've been, we still take precautions. So there are people who are working, hands-on type of work, preparing for the launch. But then there's people like me, like I haven't gone anywhere since the pandemic. I've been working right from my computer. I had a meeting yesterday, which is called the flight test readiness review. That meeting went from 9 a.m. until 8:30 p.m.
Wow.
And basically all in preparation for this launch on the 27th that I'm telling you about.
That's huge.
You're probably going to see a lot of things in the news about that launch.
Oh my gosh, that is huge. And we definitely want to make sure that we highlight that because, again, that's something that the country can all kind of band together, come together. I think we need that at this point. We feel very disconnected from one another, and it is a rallying moment in a time that we can just look at something positive. And certainly knowing that we're still moving forward with the technology is huge. And certainly, of course, we knowing that and hearing the word Mars, even in this terminology now, is amazing, because who would have thought that we would be talking about trying to have life and sustain life on Mars? And I'm assuming, if I'm understanding this correctly, that is still in the works then.
Yeah, and that's the next step. There's 2 things I just want to really share real quick, is that, so the other part of that is while we have SpaceX and Boeing taking us to the space station, NASA internally, we're working on our own, I can say, internal capability to go back to the moon.
Wow.
So we're going to go to the moon, but we're not just going to go and just be there for a few weeks. We're going to stay. We're going to develop basically a sustained presence there. And so the 2 dates you want to remember about that is 2024. So that's when the first woman and the next man will set foot on the moon. The first woman astronaut and the next man will step on foot on the moon. No one's been on the moon since early 70s. And then 4 years after that, 2028, that's when we're going to try to build a sustained presence there and basically have people. And so what we're going to do is similar to we've been working on the space station for 20 years, learning how to live there. We're going to try to learn how to live on the moon learning to use the resources that are there, and find out what the barriers are, and so that we can go to Mars, because Mars, it takes about 1.5 years to get to Mars.
Really? So it's not like it's right around the corner, like you're going to the grocery store, obviously. 1.5 years?
Yes, so that means round trip. If you just went and turned around, it'll be 3 years almost.
Wow. And human life can sustain in space for that length of time then?
Well, that's where we're learning. And that's why we have to kind of go to the moon and spend some time there. And so the idea is that we would go to the moon in 2030s. So,
wow.
you know, some of our young folks, if you're in your, you know, pre-teens or whatever, and you go 20 years from now, 30 years now, like, you know, I am, then we're talking about you may be one of the astronauts that walk on the moon.
That is amazing. Wow. Or Mars. Exactly. This is amazing. I mean, honestly, this just kind of gets me so inspired when I hear some of these kind of conversations, because it's the technology that you just don't hear about right now. And, you know, we're not hearing a whole lot about a whole lot of things, but this is important to know that, you know, space exploration is really moving forward. And I know that we had wanted to take in some questions, and I know we've got a couple of questions that I'd love to get to.
Yes.
One of them that I'd like to ask you comes from one of our youth board members. Sam Farrell wanted me to ask, what were some important undergraduate experiences that led you to your career path? And I think that's kind of important, because as we're talking about the possibilities in the future, we need to know, how do we chart those paths?
Yes, that's a good question, Sam. Thanks for asking. So one of the key things I would really recommend is internships and co-ops and relevant experience. So everybody's, you know, required to kind of take the coursework, and you're gonna want to be successful. Believe me, you want to be successful. You want to have greater than 3.0 GPA, and there are a lot of resources. I used to get tutored. As a matter of fact, we have a running joke with me and my wife. So I was actually in Upward Bound, if you might remember that program,
Yes.
Upward Bound Talent Search. So my wife actually was a tutor there. So she actually tutored me, and she's not really even a math person. But anyway, through various programs, I've gotten tutored, and then I became a tutor. So I tutored when I was a freshman, sophomore in different classes. And you know, you can always, it helps you to sharpen your own skills when you teach somebody else. But
Yes.
So you're gonna need to be successful in your curriculum, and so you want to be able to you know, focus on that. But to augment that, something that other people don't do, they don't do internships and co-ops, and that's where some of these student societies can help you, like NSBE or AIAA or other technical type of societies on campus. And then being able to take a summer and take 3 months. I did a summer internship at Harrison Radiator, which was right there in Buffalo. So I spent the summer there after my freshman year, I think.
Wow.
Sophomore year. And then I did a summer intern at Rochester Products in Rochester, New York. So they were part of like General Motors supplier. So that was a great benefit. And they look for that on your resume and so forth. And if you can't go to a company, you know, volunteer to work in one of the labs on campus or something like that. And just real quickly, so student leadership is important too. So I was the president of the University of Buffalo Gospel Choir. So that was one of the things that really helped me, and I love to be a part of. But also, I mentioned before, I was part of the National Society of Black Engineers, so I was like the vice president at one instance. So, you know, I was able to use those and some other activities to help me to build leadership skills and to connect and work with others, because you're going to have to be able to, you know, work with others. So those are a few things that help.
That's important. And I think one of the things that you brought up leads me to my next section. We've got two of our board members here. We have a youth board member and our other board member, Bradford Watts. And we'd love for them to be able to ask you a couple of questions as well. But, you know, leadership is huge. And I think that is the key, is being able to step up, feeling comfortable, able to step up. And now I'd like to actually turn it over to Jordan. Jordan, you know, I know you have a question for our panelists, and would you mind sharing your question?
Hi, yes. Thank you so much for being here, first of all. My question also concerns the current situation with the pandemic and everything. I know that you mentioned that there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of things happening in NASA that we're looking forward to, and progress is still being made. But I was wondering if you do see any huge effects of the pandemic concerning funding or any connections that could be made and any progress that could be impeded due to the current situation.
Thank you, Jordan. Certainly, I mean, the current coronavirus situation is impacting a lot of things, and NASA is no different. So there are some other programs, they may not be as critical as the ones I've shared, but they have had to be put on pause. And so that decision had to be made at our engineering and agency leadership levels. And so the activities I mentioned to you are those what are considered the critical ones, mission critical ones. Another mission critical one, and I'll explain why it's mission critical, is the Mars 2020 rover. So we have another rover that's going to Mars. And because of that time cycle for travel I mentioned to you, it's very important that they hit the launch window for Mars 2020. And so that's coming up. So that's one reason why they've actually continued with that. Now, there are other things that we've been working on. For instance, like I mentioned about Orion or the Space Launch System. Those are the NASA internal programs. Those have slowed down. And so it could end up having a financial impact. So NASA did get some appropriations that came through that CARES Act to try to help, relieve some of that. And so, we take it a day at a time, and as we are able to try to keep things going. But there are some things that have been paused for sure.
Wow, that's important. Thank you so much, Jordan, for that question. Can I also turn it over to Bradford Watts, who is also on our board as well? Bradford, I know you had a question for him as well.
Hi, Dr. Johnson. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. It's good to have a homeboy coming back and weighing in a little bit here for our youth and your contributions. Shout out to you, City Honors grads. I was there for 7th and 8th grade before moving on to St. Joe's for high school. And my barber's a FAMU graduate, Mr. Jerry Daniels, still here on Jefferson Avenue. So
okay.
A lot of great memories and connections for our HBCUs and City Honors connections, and then being from the neighborhood. I'm right over near the Fillmore area, and so I remember those bowlers and Best. Did you ever go to the wading pool over there as a Humboldtian, we used to call them?
Absolutely, yes. And even during the blizzard of '77, they had mountains of snow.
Yes.
So we went.
That was awesome. One of my favorite memories there. But I wanted to just ask you a little question. The NFJC being a race relations organization, how do you see, I heard your story was impactful in terms of dealing with some bias as you were coming up, your trajectory. I use that for a NASA term in your career. In terms of giving our youth ways of managing this. I know many of our resources deal with diversity and inclusion. For those that would be interested going into STEM, what would be some of your suggestions to deal with that for future space and space explorations, as you were talking about some of those 2024, 2028 types of opportunities?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Brad. I would say that it's important to not go at it alone. I mentioned a few instances where it seems like I'm by myself, but what I do is try to connect with people and to try to leverage, their experiences and their background and so forth. So if there are people that who are, or if you don't know, seek out people who are advocates for folks, who have come from our background or have some barriers to succeeding in the areas that we traditionally may not be fully involved with. You got to connect with them. And so that's where those professional societies I've been a part of, and I've been a part of community activities too. So I've been very involved in ministry. I also, from a social standpoint, connect with people. I actually have led prison ministry, through my church and my fellowship, and as well as working with various community action organizations and so forth to try to help people along the way. I'm actually a foster adoptive parent. And so my wife and I, we actually have foster kids. And so on the very early end, we try to help out and African-American males are one of the least adopted kid groups. And so, there's a lot of challenges that we face, but I try to find the areas where we can be positive or work with people who are positively impacted. You're going to always find the negative. You're going to find, the things, but try to connect with people who are going to provide support and leverage those relationships to be able to propel you forward. I think that is what you're asking.
Yes, and it was good. Thank you to mentioning in terms of how your faith also impacts that in your community outreach. That's important for many of our youth to have those connections. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I know that you had mentioned, when we had talked prior about how important your faith plays into all of this. And, for a lot of folks, there's this path that people think that you can either take down the science path or you can take down the faith path. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've been able to blend and marry that initiative in your own mind?
That's the great question and your inquiry, Renee, because faith has been just a part of my life, just as much as I've been talking about science and aerospace and so forth. So, I grew up and attended Memorial Baptist Church, which is on Ferry and Humboldt. That's where I got my start. Actually, before it was over there, it was on Jefferson and Northampton.
Oh.
But so, I had that, bringing up in the faith, but you know what, like a lot of us, I didn't really embrace the faith. I found myself as I was probably later years of high school, realizing that I was singing in the youth choir, but then I was doing a whole lot of things, that was just contrary, to the values of Christian faith. And so over time, my commitment and dedication to walk a more integrity of faith, walk integrity began to blossom. And so it was really important as I graduated high school and went to college. There was some monumental moments that occurred to me where it was solidified in terms of my faith. And so I began to actually incorporate that in everything that I do. So I mentioned, like in college, I was the president of the gospel choir. I was participating in that all through my college years. Later on, like now, I'm a licensed and ordained Christian minister, and have been licensed to do marriages. And me and my wife are certified prepare and rich facilitators, which involves premarital counseling and also couples and relationship type of therapy type of things. And I had a colleague who was like, well, how does that mesh? Just like what you're asking, you're obviously a space nut, but then you're a faith nut as well. And the thing about it is I see where, they combine. Actually, if you look at one of my favorite biblical characters is Daniel, and Daniel, the 3 Hebrew boys. If you just read just that first and second chapter, it talks about how they actually excelled 10 times greater than all of the other folks in their realm. And so they were in bondage and so forth. But yet still they kind of had the ability to excel in science. If you look at the King James Version, it says science. But then they are also able to excel in faith. And certainly there are some heroes and role models of mine that actually have that combined. We are not, segmented people. We have to bring our whole self to wherever we're at. And so I mentioned to Renee, George Washington Carver. Dr. George Washington Carver is a a big fan of mine, and I've done a number of different salutes and things, but he was a person of faith. He was a scientist. He also liked drama and the arts. He played music, he wrote poetry. So for instance, Renee, I don't know if you remember this, but actually I had the leading role in our high school play. So it was actually Charlie Brown, and You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. So I was actually involved in music. So I actually played keyboard and trombone. So I was a jazz man. So I don't let people put me in a box.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah. Mhm.
And bringing your whole self, I think that is key to what you just said. Being able to bring your whole authentic self to the table is important. And I know
Yes.
we are just, I can't believe this time went so quickly. I mean, these conversations are just fantastic. I wish we could talk more and more, because there is so much information that we are learning from you today and that you have shared with us. And, you know, I wanted to give you an opportunity to end us with a quote. If you want to finish off with one of your quotes, you good?
Well, you know, yeah, I don't want to overstep time. What I could do is I can share. There's a poem that I love to use when I speak to different audiences. It's a poem that Dr. George Washington Carver used for commencement speeches. And it basically is just encouraging to folks to know that they can do it. As a matter of fact, maybe I'll read a stanza or two real quick.
Please. I'd love it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, then. So let me just bring it up real quick. So basically, the name of the poem is called Equipment, and it's by Edgar A. Guest. And Dr. George Washington Carver used it during his commencement address at Selma University in Alabama on May 27, 1942.
Wow.
And it kind of goes like this. It says, "Figure it out yourself, my lad. You've all that the greatest of men have had: 2 arms, 2 hands, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and a brain to use if you would be wise. With this equipment they all began, so start at the top and say, I can. Look them over, the wise and great, they take their food from a common plate. And similar knives and forks they use, with similar laces they tie their shoes. The world considers them brave and smart, but you've all they had when they made their start. You can triumph and come to skill. You can be great if you only will. You're well equipped for the fight you choose. You have legs and arms and a brain to use. And the man who has risen great to great deeds to begin his life with no more than you. You are the handicap you must face. You are the one who must choose your place. You must say where you want to go, how much you will study the truth to know. God has equipped you for life, but he lets you decide what you want to be. Courage must come from the soul within. The man must furnish the will to win. So figure it out yourself, my lad. You were born with all the great have had. With your equipment, they all began. Get a hold of yourself and say, I can. So to all of you, I say you can.
Thank you so much for that. That is amazing. A great way to finish this. This has been an excellent opportunity to have a really candid conversation, and I hope that you will come back and share more of your stories, and especially after that May date that we will all look forward to looking up to the skies for. And again, thank you, Dr. Dexter Johnson, for sharing your insight, your expertise, your history with us and the NFJC. Thank you for sharing and joining in with us, and we look forward to our next episode. And again, if you want further information, I'm going to share some links on our webpage and on our social sites so that you can reach out to Dr. Dexter Johnson directly. Thank you again for your time. Stay safe, everyone.
Be blessed.
Thank you. Stay safe.